Very special edition of The Flip Side. We have Danielle Strickland, and you don't want to miss what she has to say about mobilizing and aha moments and, well, everything. It's just all so good. So tune in right now on The Flip Side. Hello and welcome to The Flip Side. It's a special Thrive edition, which just simply means we get to strip mine all the incredible leaders at Thrive and bring them right here to you on The Flip Side. And today, along with Andrew McCourt, we've got Danielle Strickland, one of our favorite communicators. And Danielle has been to Thrive a couple times now and just is a force of fun and exhortation and challenge and thought. And, you're kind of a risk taker and just all sorts of great things that we love around here. So welcome, Danielle. We're really glad that you're here.
Thanks. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Good.
Well, our goal is to ask you a ton of questions and plagiarize from your life as much as possible.
Yeah.
But before we do that, we need Miss Haley to bring some coffee because
Indeed.
we are actually filming this one. It's about 4 a.m. it feels like to me, Andrea. And we need some caffeine in our life if we're going to get some of the best conversation going here. Haley,
Caffeine
what
and Jesus.
are we drinking?
We're going to take a break from the Ethiopian single origin and go to a Kenyan single origin. And so, again, it's going to have brighter flavor notes. And it's the Joshua Tree Coffee Co. Again, since we're out here in the desert.
Kenyan. Okay, so
Running
we have an ongoing sort of a friendly debate about Central American versus African coffee.
Mm-hmm. If you like higher acidity, more brighter, fruitier flavors, like Curt does, you would like the African region. I like more chocolatey, earthy, not earthy in a bad way, but chocolatey blends, and that's more Central South American.
Gotcha.
The other stuff you were serving from Joshua, the caffeine level in it was just below meth. I mean,
I think this is the same.
Because I lost a tooth drinking that. I mean, it was very good.
You had 3 cups yesterday.
I did.
Enjoy.
So we had Levi Lesko on, and Andrew asked him a genius question about.
Yeah. Ray does this on your stage. Ray goes, tell them that thing. And we're like, well, it's like throwing a pint of milk at you. Catch that. Anyway, the question simply is, what makes you fully alive? That when you're doing it. Eric Liddell said this, that God has made me fast, and when I run, I feel His pleasure. Mm-hmm. And so...
and also then he goes in slow-mo, and then there's music, and it's on the beach. I mean, who doesn't? I felt God's pleasure when I see that.
It's like, God has made me slow, and when I run, I feel pain.
Yeah,
but
just to get to know you, when are you just at your
sweet zone?
Yes, very good.
I was just talking about this the other day, to tell you the truth, because I was trying to teach my son to ride a bike. He was 8 at the time, so last year, springtime, and he knew how to ride a bike, but with training wheels, and he was scared. He's like a safety first kind of a kid, so he was kind of really scared to launch out into the no training wheel zone. And I was getting a little just parentally embarrassed that he was 8 and 5-year-olds were zipping by. And I was feeling shame on his behalf, even though he didn't have any.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
So I turned on my best, sort of motivation speech and said, you're ready. And we decided that if we just flipped up the training wheels, didn't take them off, that he could give it a go. And so he gave it a go, and he was past ready. He came back, he's beaming,
Right.
And he says, Mom, I can ride a bike. And I said, I know, isn't it amazing? And he looks at me and he goes, you could totally preach that.
Oh, my goodness.
And I said, thanks, And he goes, no, think about it. My training wheels were holding me back, And that look on that kid's face, first of all, that he could ride the bike, but then also that he connected riding the bike to real life. I think that kind of encapsulates what makes me come alive. When I can see, even in a setting where I'm teaching, or even in a one-on-one relationship conversation, or just even with my kids, that moment where the light comes on,
the aha
where
moment.
the face, that aha moment where something you just turned a lock and opened something for somebody, makes me come alive.
So good.
That makes me come alive.
I tell our Thrive students that are learning how to preach all the time, that's what you're going for. That moment where they think it before you say it. That's the best sermon they'll ever hear, is the one that they and the Holy Spirit think right here.
They get it. Yeah.
So, by the way, the reason we're able to have you is because we're down here at Southwest Thrive. And just for those that didn't get a chance to get down here, which that's a big mistake on your part, would you just recap what your session was yesterday, because it was phenomenal?
Yeah, well, I was talking to leaders, and I personally have been, just weary of the leadership casualties we're seeing publicly and sort of repeatedly. And I mean, we're seeing these publicly in context of things like the Me Too movement, Church Too movement, but also just, I think, even in my own life, the casualty of leaders that I know even personally. So I just, I took a little page out of Jesus' story of preparation for his own ministry, his suffering and death and resurrection. And there's this moment in John 12, it's kind of a famous moment, and Mark 14 is another version of a similar story, but where a woman disciple anoints Jesus in a posture that they assume, which is a posture that is really a love-based life. And then also the other posture, which is an alternative posture, which is kind of the opposite of a love-based life in many regards, even though it's still with Jesus and it's still kind of like sensible. It's another way of discipleship which actually leads away from the cross, and the discipleship of love leads to the cross. So I think I'm personally very vested and interested in how I continue to follow Jesus to the cross, to the resurrection, and not away from the cross and the resurrection. So I just had a look at it, of those kind of postures, the posture that leans in, and we talked a little bit about what your brain looks like when it's in love, and the three kind of characteristics of every brain when they're in love is pleasure, risk, and attachment. And then the opposite of that, which is, of course, duty, obligation, safety first, and of course, detachment or disconnection. And just kind of a real genuine call, even for me personally, just I'm doing this in my own life, just a call to say, like, is my relationship with Jesus, my faith, love-based?
Yes.
Is it pleasurable?
Really
is it for joy that I'm doing
So
this?
good, Danielle.
Am I stuck in sort of obligation and duty? Is this risky still? Am I
Yep.
still taking risks? Is
Yeah.
this still a thing? Or is this,
Yes.
my risk is like 25 years ago, and
Right.
now I'm
That's
just
so
doing
good.
all safe vetted,
Yeah.
And is this about attachment? Is this about relationship? Or am I stuck in sort of
Right.
outcome, success, like,
Where will I get
will
invited?
this just bring me
What will
closer
this-
to
yes,
Jesus or
exactly.
not? I mean, that's like the Jesuits use that as a guiding tool for every day. Like that, if you don't know what to do and you're facing a question in your life, here's a good question: will this decision bring you closer to Jesus, or will it take you away from Jesus?
Yeah.
That's not a bad, guiding principle.
Right now, I just feel like your son. I just feel like the training wheels have gone up, and this is going to be good for a sermon illustration.
Good, yeah.
This
use
weekend.
it. Go for it.
You thought
This
we were joking.
weekend.
Helen Fisher is
You
the
thought we were
neurologist that did the
joking
study.
about
That's
the-
good
Yeah.
when you send that to me later on,
About
because that's excellent. We were actually talking about prayer this weekend.
Yeah.
And just that whole thought of, this is going to connect me closer to Christ. And there's a whole bunch of stuff I want to do with my life, and it's really cool and whatever, but it's leading me away from God. It's not necessarily bad. It's
Right.
not evil. I'm not going to be like, start dealing drugs on the side.
Yeah.
But
It actually can be good. I
Yeah.
mean,
Right,
that's
right,
actually the great
right.
disguise of it. Is it's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. It's
Yeah.
just, and even, I mean, that's in the text in John 12. I mean, we should sell this and give it to the poor. Like,
Yes.
it can't get better than that. That's not
Right,
only good, that's
right.
noble. Like,
Yes.
that's just a brilliant idea. It's just not the thing Jesus was asking for right then.
Yeah, and it's interesting just after that, when it says the Greeks came and they had, it's like being in Southern California, they'd been to Disneyland, they'd been to the temple, Universal Studios, they'd been to all the things visiting, and they're, we want to see the Jesus guy as well, and I asked Philip, and they said, I got an insight, I'll let you see Jesus, and they were hoping for, obviously, for a miracle, and he turns around and he goes, instead of like touching a guy with a shriveled arm, he just goes, unless a seed of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains a single seed. It was like, wah, wah. You were expecting a resurrection. And he
Right.
goes, no, but this, if you want to see me, that's it.
Right.
That's interesting.
Right
It's
there.
dead.
That's
So Ray, our founding pastor, talks a lot about there's a way to serve Jesus that leads you away from Jesus.
Right.
Yeah.
And he specifically says it to our staff frequently
Right.
because our significance is not in Christ and what he's done for us and our connection to him, but in what we're producing and making in our leadership.
So good.
It's like the older I get, I find there's this grumpy old man in me that I have to just fight every day and go, oh man, I could be doing some wonderful things for Jesus, preach a great sermon, but come out of it not the best version of me. And what I love about what you're saying, Danielle, not closer to Jesus. You know, and no one really knows it but me on the inside. And what's interesting is every leader we've had in this room, this has been the theme.
Oh, definitely.
And then it is the atmosphere that's being set right now by these failures of leaders are saying, what am I doing to have the authentic Jesus following me be me as a leader, not...
Yeah, Danielle, what does that look like in your life?
Yeah,
Just
practically.
practically. You know.
So this is funny because about 6 years ago, I shared in the preach about a personal friend of mine who was like a hero who crashed and burned, and a bunch of us got together, sort of said like, what happened,
Right.
and then also what's happening with us,
Right.
and how do we not do this? Like, how do we change the trajectory of our lives? And we started a way of life together called Infinitum,
Okay.
which is Latin for boundless, and it's kind of just a way, like a system, a means. I almost refer to it as an open order. So it's very monastic-y. Because I feel like it's kind of like monastics meet 12-step program.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a
Right.
mixture of those things. Very simple. It's not complicated. And the focus of it is on practice, not knowledge. This is one of the problems is discipleship has been such a knowledge base. We think like the more we know about
Yes.
Jesus,
Yes.
it should solve our problems,
Yes.
which clearly does not
Yes.
solve our problems.
Yes.
So I don't need to know more about Jesus, although I am intrigued and will continue to study. I need to practice what he says
Right.
more.
Yes.
So it's a practice-based way of living. So I start my day with a daily prayer. And the kind of the focus of Infinitum is to follow Jesus, to make following Jesus the main priority of my daily life. And then the value of Infinitum is love. So if I'm following Jesus, this is really super clear in the gospel. I don't know how we got this so confused and complicated. But if I'm following Jesus, it's not just going to look like right belief or right doctrine or right, it's going to look like love.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't look like love, I'm
Yeah.
probably not following Jesus. So it's not a bad sort of like gauge of if you look at my life today, does it look like love? And but then what does love look like? And that's sort of the sentimentality, or is it like Hallmark? Is it Disney? Like, is it I'm a doormat? Like, what does a life of love look like? And we determine kind of three foundational kind of pillars, I would say, or foundations that are what love looks like. And one's surrender. So a surrendered life is what love looks like. You look at the life of Jesus and you'll see that surrender is a power posture in his life.
Yeah.
It's how he accesses the love of the Father and pours it out. So surrender. And then the second one is generosity, which is this principle, this has been mind-blowing for me because I grew up in the Salvation Army. So generosity has never been a problem. Like, I think everyone should be merciful. And we're like trained to be merciful. But I never understood generosity as reciprocal. In other words, Jesus summed it up like this: freely you receive, now freely give. So that actually generosity is not just about me giving more, it's also me posturing my life to receive from the kind of unlimited resources of heaven. So this is a fantastic pillar in my life because I realize that wherever I'm stingy, wherever I'm unforgiving, wherever I'm bitter, wherever I'm resentful, like all those things are indicators that I haven't received in order to give. So this generous life. And the final one is an others-focused posture, or a mission-focused which means simply this: I can go all around the world telling people they should be missional and still not know my neighbor's name.
Yeah.
And the ultimate reality for me is that I want to practice my faith, not just preach about it.
Yeah.
So every day I start, the rhythm of Infinitum is I start every day with a prayer, what I call a posture prayer.
Yeah.
We actually have like body postures that I use, where I walk through like my natural inclination as a human being is to fight for my right and to make something happen. But I choose a posture of surrender today. So everything I have, over to you, God. And then I'll hold my hands out like this in front of me and I'll say like, my natural human posture is to keep and to take and to hold. But I'm going to choose as a disciple of Jesus to like open up my hands today, and I'm going to receive, and I ask for what I need for today, and I'm going to look today for where I can give this out in the world. And then the final posture mission, I cross my arms. I say my natural posture is to spectate and to criticize and to critique.
Yeah.
What an easy posture that is, and to really say that's not my problem.
Right.
But then I open my life to the needs, the deepest needs, and even the most pressing needs, to say, here I am, my life's open to you. And so that posture prayer, just by itself, I mean, it's only a few minutes long. It doesn't take long. That's been a game changer for me on a daily basis. It's taken this idea of following Jesus out of this like super spiritual space and brought it into this daily practice for me, looking
beautiful.
for places where I
Yeah.
can live out
Yeah.
love and practice Jesus in the world that I'm in. Then once a week, I meet with what we call a hub, which is a small group where we have question-based curriculum. This is all online. There's an app. There's a website. It's all free if anybody's interested.
I'm looking at DanielleStrickland.com right now. Here it
Yeah, and
is,
there's a
all right
link to
here.
Infinitum. And that weekly connect is really, we asked a whole bunch of leaders and even ourselves, like, who do you confess your sins to? But not like in a way that, we've done accountability in a way where it's like an external measurement tool,
Yeah.
which is yet one more thing I feel guilty about in my life of not measuring up to some
Yeah.
sort of ideal. So not that kind of, I don't mean that.
That's good.
I mean, like, talk to me about your daily practice. Like, tell me about what decisions you're making and whether they're leading you towards Jesus. Like, talk to me about areas that you're trying to control and you feel out of control. And let's pray about those things. So, like, not just what you're doing.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I get you. You're looking at porn and you shouldn't be. Okay, like, but talk to me about, like, why your mind's looking at porn. Like,
the
talk
root
to me
of that.
about, talk to me about what you're believing inside of you.
Yes.
Where are you lonely?
Yeah.
Like, where is your relationship lacking intimacy with your wife? Like,
Yes.
talk to me about that, because that's
Yeah.
what I
Right.
want to pray about
Yeah.
and pray with you and walk with you. So that's been amazing once a week. For me, I travel all the time, so sometimes that's a FaceTime thing or a Skype thing. But that's also been amazing. And then once a month, as a collective global community, we send out like a challenge. So, somebody said, like, for this month, one person had a struggle with needing to be recognized and always feeling ripped off if they weren't credited. And so they just decided to attack that in their hub. They just decided that they were going to do invisible acts of kindness, but like on the download. Like, no one was going to know. They were just going to, like, help people, and no one was going to know about it for a whole month. And they said, like, it was revolutionary for their life. That thing went away. And so they submitted it to Infinitum, and we threw it out as an idea for other people to practice. So that's kind of one of the challenges you can do this
Very
month,
cool.
are just like just attack your need for recognition by doing sort of invisible things. And then some people, of course, fasting, and there's a Lent guide, and blah, blah, blah. We're just having
It's
fun
really
trying to
good.
follow Jesus.
It's really,
Yeah.
really good. So many good things on your website. Brave Global, Women Speaking Collective, Amplify Peace. The Infinitum's on there, and you already talked about of all those things. What are you really passionate about, and what do you want us to all know about?
They're all mobilize,
Right,
because I
right.
think it's a now moment. I think that the church is in a real strategic place of bringing the kingdom to the world in like a whole bunch of ways. What looks like chaos, which is everywhere,
Right.
is actually opportunity.
Exactly.
And so in my own experience, I guess the thing that lights me up is that, like, that idea of people riding their own bikes. And
Yeah,
so good.
so most of the things that I spend my life on these days are just helping mobilize churches, communities, people.
It's funny because there is some voices in evangelicalism that are going, this social justice thing, this is a distraction from being preachers of the gospel. I don't see that bifurcation. In fact, I think it's theologically impossible. But in a real world sense, you're talking to Jack and Jill out there that on Monday morning want to get up and be authentic, serious followers of Christ and be missional, compassion-oriented people in their workplace. What does it mean to be a person that is mobilized for that? I mean, how does that look like? Danielle, give us some coaching advice on how to go out and be a mobilized Christian.
Yeah, I mean, and this is one of the things I like about the Infinitum practice is it's kind of like what's in front of you, like
Right.
what you're. So
Right.
I really lean away, which is really bad for promotion, but I lean away from kind of saying this is how you should do it, because I
Right.
feel like God's going to show you what to do with your gift, and it might be a neighbor or someone down the street or an issue that you really deeply care about. One of the things that I deeply care about is this Brave Global campaign. It's trying to mobilize churches to reach vulnerable girls before they're trafficked. So I spent 22 years of my life, scraping women off of street corners and out of brothels and trying to get them out of sexual exploitation, which I'm still for and will
Right,
always
totally,
want to
totally.
do. But I had, so many conversations, one strategic conversation with a woman that runs a brothel, asking her, how does somebody like you, who is so strong and capable and independent and, obviously talented, do this with your life? Like, why are you doing this?
Right.
And she took me in the back room, shut the door because nobody ever sees her weak. And she told me the story, like she's 11 years old, raped by her dad for the last time, ran away from home. Truck pulls over. Guy says, I'll give you a place to stay if you have sex with me. She said, I turn my first trick. I'm 11. I cry that night. I cry the next night. I cry the next night. And she said to me, like, when I got done crying, I made the best of what I'd been given. And then she looked at me, and I will never forget this, with tears in her eyes. And she said, where were you when I was 11? And now I instantly remembered, like, the hundreds of women that I've heard the exact same story from. Like, just it all just got together, and the Holy Spirit just was like, where were you when she was 11? Where were you when she was 11? And then we came across a study when I was doing a Justice Department for the Salvation Army in Western USA here, that 70 to 80% of sex trafficking victims from America are from foster care. And we were like, dun, 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 dun. Like, we were like, what? And then at the same time, we were like, wait a minute. We know their names. Like, we literally know where they are. And it dawned on us, this idea that if exploiters could target vulnerable girls for trafficking, why couldn't the church target vulnerable girls for redemption and empowerment? So we started...
Wait, hold it. I want the listeners to get that into their DNA right there. That's just... Well, it's just smart. That's what it is.
Well, it's kingdom, isn't it? It's another passage that's been rocking my world these days is where Jesus and the disciples come across the man born blind, and the disciples say, whose fault is it that this man was born blind? Was it his fault, or was it his parents' fault? And, I feel like that's where we land in our conversations about most things. We just have this big, like, even this idea of social justice. Like, I mean, it's all this, like, it's a nonsensical argument that leads nowhere, because even if you answer the question, like, even if there is fault to be found, which, let's be honest, in every injustice we face, there's fault to be found. Like, the fact that these girls are being trafficked, like, whose fault is it? Well, is society's fault? Yes. Is it the church's fault? Sure. Is it men's fault? Obviously. It's always men's fault. Is it... you know what I mean? Like, whose fault is it? It's everybody's fault. But in the end, even if you answer that question, so what? You're still on the side of the road with the blind guy. You're nowhere, know? And I feel like so much of our time is spent on these things that will lead us nowhere. And Jesus says, this man's been born blind for the glory of God. And you're like, what just happened? Like, he's just like, this is an opportunity, guys. This is for glory. So in those places, I feel like in your own life. So for Brave, for me, this was a place of blindness, of suffering, of pain, of, like, often fault finding. Like, I would drive home sometimes from what I did, and I would just wonder, like, are there any good men in the world? Like, after hearing of such, horrific, and then I would get to the door of my house, and of course be met by my 2-year-old son, Moses, with a big grin, and my loving husband. I felt like God just gave me a room full of boys to love, so that he would remind me that indeed there are good men in the world. And actually, that's part of our job, is to make good men in the world, blah, blah, blah. I could go on and on. But this is a passion because it's personal to me. And I feel like that's how you find your passion, and even church, even this church, do a Brave. Do a Brave. Why not? It's an empowerment conference for girls.
We don't rehearse questions here, okay? And this might sound a little bit random, but I hear the word prophetic being used a lot today, okay? We're talking about social justice. Sometimes social justice is over here, and prophetic's over here, and are they set? What is it to be prophetic? How are you prophetic?
Yeah, I think my favorite prophetic sort of understanding probably comes from Walter Brueggemann, which is basically living the future. Which I think, I think Jesus, this is him at his best, is he's living the future. And everyone's like, what's happening? How are you? You can't do that. You can't do that. And I mean, he's still living the future. Even though he lived like 2,000 years ago, we're looking at his life going, what? That's something coming still. And I feel like I want to be prophetic in that way. I want my life, the churches I'm involved in, the movements I'm a part of, to be living the future, to be embodying the principles of God's kingdom come right now. That's what it means to be prophetic. I think, yes, I think sometimes we think prophetic means to see the future or to speak the future, which is we get, prophetic words, which I think are edifying. I think, I've had people speak beautiful, encouraging, edifying things to me prophetically. And I've seen people with beautiful prophetic gifts speak prophetically into people. I've got beautiful stories of that. And it makes me hunger after the prophetic. But I want to embody the prophetic. Like, again, back to this kind of practice thing. I want to be a living prophetic sign that it's possible for God's kingdom to come on earth. That's, I think, the ideal prophetic life.
Another Ray quote. Ray always says, we've got to get rid of this idea that deep is to know more Greek. Deep is to change people's lives, to
Yeah.
unleash compassion. And
Yeah.
that's the deep Christians are producing the fruit of that transformation of love and acceptance, forgiveness. Knowing Greek's not bad. Let's know some Greek.
Yeah.
But if it doesn't produce that, you're not deep. And there's a little flip there.
Yeah, and I think it's Frost, Michael Frost, I think he wrote a book called A Questionable Life, which was, I think, this idea of a prophetic life will raise questions. Like, what? You're doing what?
Right,
like,
right,
you're
right.
living
That's so good,
what?
Danielle.
Like, you're
Yeah.
doing what? And I think that, and of course, that's Jesus. I mean, they're holding whole theological symposiums just on Jesus's latest act, you know?
Yeah, just on his schedule.
Yeah, that's right. And so you're like, yeah, who he's having lunch with. You
Yeah,
know, this
right.
needs, I think living a questionable life in terms of towards the kingdom come, that's
Yeah.
the best.
It's a
prophetic.
great answer.
Danielle, Haley's telling me that we've only got 5, which is shocking to me.
Yeah.
Shocking to me. This has gone so fast. But I'm going to ask you the question I've asked a few other leaders. I've just been knee deep in the last half of Ephesians lately. And Paul, this pivot point, and I love Ephesians, just 2 simple ideas. God loves you, therefore treat each other better. And that pivot point right at chapter 4 where he does that, he says, I urge you, or what was it in the NIV?
I beseech you in the King
I
James.
beseech you, live a life worthy. And just as a leader, if you were to just look at the church and say, I urge you, and this is what I hope for you, and I beseech you, what's your urge to us?
Yeah, I think my urge for the church is to live the kingdom now. And I mean, it's just what we've been talking about, like to live the kingdom now, not like, I wish we could do this or I wish we could do that. Like, live the kingdom now, like do it. Like,
Right.
stop holding back, like, and
Right.
stop having these nonsensical conversations, you know, with the top 10 reasons why we can't. And just start living God's kingdom
Yes.
now in your life personally, in your relationships, in your communities, in your families. I mean, it is not rocket science. I think we make easy things complex to hide behind the complexity. We do it all the time. You know, like poverty, it's so complex. I'm like, it's not. It boils down to sharing. Gee, I wish it was more complex than that because I
Right.
could sleep better at night. But in
Right.
the end, as Mother Teresa helped us understand, there's more than enough.
Right.
Just God's children refuse to share. So why don't we just practice sharing? You know what I
Right.
mean? Like, why don't we
Yeah.
live open-handed? That's just one thing.
Right.
The foster care system's a mess. You know, it's so complex. How will we fix it? Oh, I don't know. Foster some kids. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, we hide behind complexity.
We're looking for the clever, quick fix that someone else will do.
That someone else does, that's right. And it's time for us to actually follow Jesus and do what we can, where we are, with what we have. This is all that's ever been required,
Yeah.
is to live a life of love. Live that, and you'll be living a life worthy.
Yeah.
Shit. Another good answer.
Danielle, that's so good, so good, so much good stuff. By the way, a couple exhortations for you. If you've not heard Danielle speak and teach, please get online now and listen to some of her talks. Get on the Thrive site. The other thing is get on her website, daniellestrickland.com. There's so much that we didn't have time to cover that's so rich and good, and it's all, like she said, towards mobilization. So go ahead and get there and start mobilizing. One of the things I want to tell you is every single week we do this because we're trying to not be weekend Christians that hear a little bit of the Bible on the weekend and then we go. We're trying to just have this be in our DNA all the time. So if you know someone that would benefit from just having this conversation as a starter in their thoughts, go ahead, like and subscribe and share. And also, I'm on this kick where I'm going, ask Andrew McCourt a tough question. This guy, he's much smarter than he appears. And he really is. So in the comments, leave us your comments and questions. We'll deal with them on
King of
the flip
Google.
side. And thanks for giving us your time. Tune in next week. It's going to be another great episode. Bye-bye.